Welcome to the program. I'm your host, Neil Howard, here on Health Professional Radio. Thank you so much for joining us again. Going to be speaking with Dr. William Flood this morning, Chief Medical Officer at NantHealth. He's joining us to talk about some significant findings presented at the San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium 2020. Welcome to Health Professional Radio, Dr. Flood. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Oh, thank you. We really appreciate the opportunity to share some of our observations and learnings from NantHealth.
If you would, give our listeners a brief background and then talk briefly about your role there at NantHealth.
So NantHealth, as a company, is a software solutions company where our solutions collect, they move, they interpret, and they act on complex and highly sensitive information, mostly in the healthcare space. So the Eviti solution, which is where the data we're going to talk about comes from, is a decision support tool that collects this information about patients and standards of care and subsequently facilitates high quality and high value health care for patients with our present focus on cancer care. So with, thinking of our tool as that cancer decision support tool, my background is in oncology. I joined the startup that became the Eviti product about 15 or 16 years ago after many years in academic oncology practice. Fortunately, I was also able to do some additional graduate work in healthcare quality, biostatistics, health economics, and the like, in addition to the clinical care and research that I did as part of my usual work. So I was able to bring that background in healthcare quality and economics to that startup to really help drive value in cancer care. The poster that we're going to discuss was focused on the use of biosimilars in the treatment of patients with breast cancer. The FDA started this pathway for biosimilar approval going back to 2009. Back then, Congress created this pathway for, quote, biosimilar, unquote, because they recognized that biologic products are very valuable in the treatment of multiple illnesses, and cancer being a great example. Mm-hmm. But these drugs are very expensive. They're very complex, and there was not a lot of competition. And so by providing this biosimilar opportunity, the goal was to introduce competition at the same time as maintaining high quality. And by doing that, we increase the availability of treatment options and increase access to this valuable type of care through competition. The most common way that we think about drugs being developed and then having less expensive alternatives are probably like a brand drug versus the generic. Okay. A drug company develops a new cholesterol medication, and it's a totally new molecule, and they have it has a chemical name or generic name, but it also has a trade name. And for the first number of years, that drug is only available as the trade drug, but then people are allowed to duplicate it and then sell it as generic after the patent expires. Okay. Well, those are really very well described chemical entities. I mean, you can draw the structure of it very clearly. You can synthesize it, very exactly in the lab and then in the factory. It's really a true like-for-like substitution. Biologic drugs, on the other hand, are drugs where the factory isn't a factory in the sense that we think about it. It's cells. And they're producing usually what are proteins that have a very specific effect. And because they're processed by cells that are trained or educated in how to make this specific protein, it's never going to be exactly reproducible the same way as factory X, factory Y, and factory Z can reproduce aspirin. A matter of fact, even the original product from last year is probably not identical to the original product of this year, just because of subtle changes that happen over time within the final product and how the cell makes it. So there is no way to make an exact copy of a biologic drug. However, as the biosimilar program shows, companies can make drugs that, if not biologically or chemically identical to that biologic original, still have the same targets and the same properties, the same general effectiveness and side effect profile and disposition by the body. And that's what makes it a biosimilar, but not a true exact copy like a generic.
So what were some of the specific findings from this study?
Well, the overall issue here was, can introduction of biosimilars into breast cancer therapy maintain quality, but at the same time reduce cost? I mean, that was the goal of Congress and this biosimilars pathway. So there's a very specific biosimilar drug that's used in a specific group of patients with breast cancer. And the original drug is called Trastuzumab. And it's very effective in treating patients who have a specific type of breast cancer called HER2/neu positive disease. In that subset of patients, their tumors overexpress a protein called HER2/neu, and that sends a growth signal for the tumor to grow. And it makes it tougher to treat with just standard hormonal therapy or chemotherapy. And years ago, a company developed an antibody called Trastuzumab that binds to this HER2 protein and inactivates it. And that helps the tumor respond to additional treatment. So in patients who have HER2 positive breast cancer, we have been using that in combination with chemotherapy, both for patients who have had surgery and we're treating to prevent the tumor from recurring, in patients who are getting ready for surgery to increase the effectiveness of shrinking the tumor before the surgery, hopefully making the surgery more easy and more effective. And also in patients whose tumors have come back after curative therapy, adding this Trastuzumab to other treatments, or even using it by itself, improves the effectiveness of the treatment. So we have that long history of this very effective but very expensive drug. Biosimilars have now been introduced in that have this same function. And so we wanted to look at whether we were hitting these goals of using more biosimilar use, and hopefully providing an opportunity for both maintaining quality but also saving money, making the treatment more valuable. So we looked at real-world data, and real-world data came from our Eviti Connect product. And Eviti Connect provides this cancer decision support in the pre-authorization space, connecting the doctor's office to the payer in real time to facilitate the start and maintain the quality of cancer care. And what we saw over time was that there was an increasing use of the biosimilars over the reference Trastuzumab product. Over that entire time frame from June 2019 through October 31st, 2020, about 32% of patients received a biosimilar in place of the Trastuzumab reference product.
Well, Dr. Flood, briefly talk about some of the potential cost savings associated with using these biosimilars.
Well, that's the goal of biosimilars and their use in medical care in general, not just in cancer. And so in breast cancer, we looked at how the biosimilars were being used over our data set. Again, that roughly 32% of patients receiving a biosimilar. And then we plugged it into a economic model. And for that economic model, we kind of estimated the typical duration of therapy for patients receiving trastuzumab or the biosimilar, and then plugged in the different costs. Using costs from July 2020 CMS pricing, the typical price for a dose of trastuzumab would be around $4,500, while the biosimilar average price was around $3,600, leading to a savings of $884 per dose. When we applied that over the use in our population, that led to a significant savings of over $36 million over the reported treatment plans. So this is definitely a great opportunity to maintain high-quality cancer care, but lower the dose for our patients, our employers, our society in general. For the people who want to look at our work in more detail, I'd first refer them to the San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium website, where they can hopefully get access to our poster. Also, at NantHealth.com, we have a press release with a more detailed description of the poster.
I appreciate you joining us here on Health Professional Radio this morning. I'm hoping that we'll speak again. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, listen in, download it SoundCloud, and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com, Health Professional Radio.